Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 632 Your Victory Over Misconceptions. How consideration prevents you from developing misconceptions concerning the Father's will. The podcast objectives are restate how consideration defeats the spirit of disregard, analyze the nature of spiritual warfare at this juncture, reveal what is at stake in your war with misconception, and reveal the key to your victory over misconceptions. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcast or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. How you gained the victory over disregard. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 626 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we began analyzing how consideration, i.e., the fundamental degree of knowledge, prevents you from falling query to disregard, i.e., the fundamental degree of ignorance. And we came to the following conclusion, which I will offer as a treasure box. By establishing Yahuwah's will as the baseline for all stimuli entering your mind, the output of your thought processes will no longer be undeveloped. On the rather, your thought processes will, for the first time ever, have the power to transfer developed thoughts into your CPU for processing, increasing the power and the efficiency of the thought generation process. Now, there are countless revelations evolving from this major miracle, and in time, we will address many of them in accordance with Yahuwah's will as we analyze the evolution of our wars with ignorance and deception. But for now, we must seal the deal on revealing how the elevation of your thought processes prevents you from disregarding any facet of Yahuwah's will. Now, if you recall, consideration has the power to unlock a perpetual train of spiritual thought within your mind. This is crucial because this train of thought prevents you from being distracted, which prevents you from becoming complacent, which makes it impossible for you to fall quarry to disregard. That's the good news. Now, here's the bad news. Vis-a-vis, disregard has a back door. To wit, she works behind the scenes to decrease your sense of urgency, which forces you to forfeit the power of spiritual routine, which forces you back into a reality of complacency, i.e., the beginning of the progression of death. Now, this is where consideration comes onto the scene. Vis-a-vis, by unlocking the power of meditation, consideration elevates your thought processes to a higher spiritual plane. Here lies the inflection, which I will offer as a revelation. Get this. By elevating your thought processes to a higher spiritual plane, you unlock the potential to maintain a progressive sense of urgency. All you need is a baseline powerful enough to stimulate the near infinite processing power of your mind. Enter Yahuwah's will, the only script that can stimulate your mind to the point where a progressive sense of urgency can be maintained. Now, this is crucial for by maintaining a progressive sense of urgency. Disregard has no backdoor to initiate the progression of death. And this is how you gain the victory over disregard. For the power of meditation is the key to your success. Praise Yah. Not only this, but meditation is also your secret weapon for gaining the victory over misconceptions. And this is the second half of the equation you must solve to stop the progression of death before it starts. And seeing as this is the only way we can receive the will of Elohim to progress our salvation, we must complete the work before us by solving this equation. Let's get started. You must now go on the attack. Now, first things first, we should consider the relationship between disregard and misconception. Along these lines, disregard is the invading army, and misconception is the enemy nation. Now, if you recall, we have analyzed this relationship many times before, to wit, on every occasion of spiritual war. In your lessons on faith and doubt, obedience and disobedience, virtue and contempt, and prejudice and the fear of Elohim. Now, on every occasion, we saw that the degrees of lawlessness fight in pairs as a primary function. Along these lines, one degree is designed to create an opening beyond your detection by infecting your soul with a minor infection. This is why the Ruach has led me to refer to all the degrees of lawlessness as spiritual diseases and viruses. For the second degree in each pair uses the opening created by the first to infiltrate some facet of your being until you are wholly infected and growing worse. Now, in your prior wars with lawlessness, we analyzed two examples of spiritual warfare. To wit, we analyzed the scenario where you lose your battles and the terrific cost. And we analyzed the scenario where you recover and you win the battles that you had lost. No doubt, our present analysis will be slightly different, for we have already analyzed what happens when you lose your battles with ignorance and deception. Vis-a-vis, you don't recover. Quite the contrary. You, my friend, become trapped in a cone of thoughtlessness and rejection. Therefore, the only scenario that is worth analyzing is the scenario where you never fall into the progression of death. And we have already taken our first step. Vis-a-vis, we have insulated ourselves from disregard and we resisted a very lethal injection that is designed to poison you with 7 spiritual viruses to the point where you are beyond correction. Now, that said, you must appreciate how the spiritual battle has shifted. To wit, you are no longer guarding yourself from an invasion. Quite the contrary, you, my friend, must now go on the attack. Here is why. The invader has a home base, i.e., an enemy nation that authorized the invasion. And if you don't defeat that enemy nation, they will continue to send legions of warriors to engage you in spiritual battle. Ergo, you will be subjected to countless, endless invasions. Therefore, you have 2 choices. You can fight pointless battles with an enemy you have already defeated, or you can defeat your enemy at the source and put an end to needless war. As I say, those are your 2 choices, and the choice, my friend, is yours. Everything is at stake. Now, if you're still with me, I'm quite sure that you are prepared to take door number 2. For only a fool engages in superfluous battle, especially when the odds of defeat increase exponentially. And defeat on this wise is both contemporary and endless death. Crucial facts. Now, that said, you must appreciate that misconception as the enemy nation is designed to reinstate noncompliance. You can see this in the table below. To wit, the primary goal of the questioning is to cause you to have misconceptions about Yahuwah's will. For if you have misconceptions about Yahuwah's will, you will not be compliant regarding his will. It is inevitable. Now, we analyze this matter in End Times 534, the impact of ignorance and deception, part 4, which was posted on November 10th, 2025. That said, if you have not engaged that podcast, you must, for you will never understand the purpose of this war if you have no idea what you are fighting for. And that podcast will tell you exactly what you are fighting for. Now, there were many revelations we shared in that podcast, but for the sake of time, we will only address 2, beginning with the following interest point. Consider this, my friends, and remember, misconception prevents you from taking the next step in your quest by deceiving you into migrating outside of the way of holiness without appreciating that you are migrating outside of the way of holiness. This transpires because she has the power to switch scenes on you. Alas, 1 minute you are on the beaten path, and the next minute you are getting off the beaten path without realizing that you are getting off the beaten path. Now, this devastating setback sets the stage for the next revelation you must consider from End Times 534. Get this. By reinfecting you with noncompliance, Misconception has the power to strip you of all your spiritual armor. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, you have no hope of surviving, let alone thriving in spiritual warfare without spiritual armor. As I say, you will be DOA. For when it comes to misconception, everything is at stake. How to prevent misconceptions from ever forming. Now, these things being what they surely are, there is only one thing left to do. Vis-a-vis, we must analyze your path to victory over misconceptions. So stay with me and I will show you. Now, first things first, I do have good news. To wit, you have already defeated her invading army. Remember, you resisted disregard, and in doing so, you closed the door on despair, shut the door right in her face, in the face. Now, that said, the battlefield has shifted. To wit, you are no longer staving off an invasion. Quite the contrary. You, my friend, are now the invader. Ergo, you are taking the battle to the enemy. Here is what that means. You are not going to wait for misconceptions to form and then try to deal with them afterwards, knowing that it is near impossible to deal with them afterwards. On the rather, you, my friend, will create a spiritual routine that prevents misconceptions from ever forming. Praise Yah. Now, the key to unlocking the power of a spiritual routine that has the power to prevent misconceptions from ever forming is meditation. To wit, the same key to your victory over disregard, i.e., her invading army. Now, if you recall, meditation by definition is to devise and to contrive. Along these lines, meditation has the power to provide the highest order of spiritual structure and context to the procession of stimuli. We know this because the Father's will is, at this juncture, the baseline for all stimuli that enter your thought dimension. You learned this in Monday's podcast. And here is how this applies to today's lesson. When stimuli enter your thought dimension, they are purged by the criteria of Yahuwah's will, and thus the majority of stimuli that could cause misconceptions will never enter your thought processes. As I say, this is how meditation provides spiritual structure and context to stimuli. But wait, that's not all. Remember, meditation by definition is to revolve in the mind. And here is how this is applied. After the enhanced stimuli enter your zone of logic and your zone of creativity, they are transformed into the highest order of independent, i.e., micro thought. Enter the evidence. Now, when I refer to micro thoughts, I am referring to the independent mental pieces that formulate thoughts. Look at it this way. If a thought is equated to a puzzle, a micro thought is an independent piece of the puzzle. Ergo, the path to generating informed thoughts lies in your ability to piece together all the corresponding independent thoughts at the micro level. Simple enough. Now, that is the solution. Here is the problem. To wit, in times past, These micro thoughts were fragmented pieces that had no organization or correlation due to the conflict of evolving criteria. Plainly speaking, the pieces to the puzzle were not very clear at all. Ergo, it was impossible for you to put together all the pieces by the appointed time. And so, what did you do? Well, I'll tell you, your mind is a lot like a computer. Ergo, no thought can remain forever in the queue. Ergo, your thought processes will do the best with what they have, and they will generate undeveloped thoughts. To wit, a best guess as to what the puzzle should look like, with the hope that your CPU will fill in the blanks. Now, here again, this is how things used to be. But now we have a baseline for the evolving criteria. Enter the will of Elohim, a script of power that interprets every form of thought to the micro level. Ergo, there is no longer a conflict. Quite the contrary. All that remains is harmony and a powerful script guiding the constant procession of stimuli. Praise Yah. Now, this transformation is the most critical factor in the elevation of your mind to a higher spiritual plane. Vis-a-vis, your thought processes are no longer being fed fragmented interpretations of incongruent stimuli and, at best, generating undeveloped thoughts. Quite the contrary, your thought processes are now being fed accurate interpretations of unified stimuli and, at best, generating developed thoughts. And it's all because consideration has the power to interpret your thoughts at the micro level. And from that interpretation, a bevy of evidence is generated and evaluated. Per the example of a puzzle, the evidence provides you with the best spiritual intelligence to interpret every piece in order to form the most complete puzzle. Now, seeing how critical this process is, I will provide a definition for evidence to ensure that we are considering this mental factor from a uniform spiritual perspective. By definition, evidence is that which tends to prove or disprove something, something that makes plain or clear facts, information, etc., that give reason to believe that something is true. Now, this definition reveals the power of evidence. To wit, by generating evidence, consideration eliminates any misconceptions that could arise in the thought generation process. And in effect, this eliminates them all. This happens as a bevy of evidence enters your thought processes. And per the power of meditation, your thought processes evaluate this evidence. This is what it means to revolve in the mind. To wit, your thought processes are designed to consider the evidence until you reach a developed thought. Here lies the inflection, which seals the deal on your victory over misconceptions. Consider this. By providing your CPU with developed thoughts, your thought processes ensure that the thought generation process will always be aligned with Yahuwah's will. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, when your thought generation process is governed by and aligned with the will of Elohim, it is impossible for you to have misconceptions. We know this because his will contains no misconceptions. Quite the contrary. The only misconceptions are external to his will, and they are generated by men and women who disregard his will. And thus, seeing as we have defeated the spirit of disregard, we now have before us a clear path to defeating her enemy nation. And that, my friends, is what you will do if you follow the teaching and training in this podcast and you give yourself to consideration and to meditating on the Torah of Elohim day and night. For this is the key to your victory over misconceptions and the only way you will win this fight. Selah. Now, here is the final word. Many things will be hard to believe when Yahuwah's will is misconceived. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, we spent many days analyzing the great danger of misconceptions and the power she has to destroy families, societies, and nations. Therefore, you must appreciate how your victory over this spiritual disease is a major milestone in your quest. And by eliminating the foundation of ignorance and deception, you have a clear path to eliminating all the rest. Heretofore, I recommend don't be content with these crucial victories, for there are many battles you must fight to achieve your goal, to defeat every degree of lawlessness in spiritual battle, to save your life and to free your soul. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 632, Your Victory Over Misconceptions. And the next podcast is entitled The Assault Against the Word of Truth, Part 9. I will post this podcast on Friday, March 20th, 2026. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.